Between 1979 and 1981, the city of Atlanta was gripped by an unimaginable terror as 28 African American children, teens, and adults vanished, only to be found murdered. This chilling period in history, known as the Atlanta child murders, cast a long and haunting shadow over the city, leaving an indelible mark on the nation's consciousness. As the late 70s gave way to the dawn of a new decade, the community's sense of safety and security was shattered. The victims, all of them African American, ranged in age from 7 to 28 years. They were students, friends, sons, and daughters. Their lives were abruptly ended, their futures stolen, their dreams left unfulfilled. The sheer number of victims was staggering, 28 lives snuffed out in the span of just 2 years. The impact of this unprecedented wave of violence was profound, sending shockwaves through the city of Atlanta and beyond. It was a time of fear, of confusion, of anger, and of grief. The murders triggered a citywide panic, with parents fearing for the safety of their children and residents questioning the effectiveness of law enforcement. The city was on high alert, its streets filled with palpable tension. The nation watched in horror as the grim tally of victims continued to rise, the sense of dread growing with each new report of a missing child, a found body. And yet, despite the fear and the tragedy, there was also a sense of unity. The community came together, holding vigils, organizing search parties, supporting the grieving families. They refused to be silenced, demanding justice for the victims and answers from the authorities. The Atlanta child murders were not just a series of horrific crimes, they were a tragedy that shook a city to its core. A tragedy that exposed the deep-seated racial disparities and social inequalities in American society. They were a grim reminder of the vulnerability of the marginalized, the overlooked, and the forgotten. But what exactly transpired during those 2 years of horror? Let's delve deeper. The first victim, a 14-year-old boy, vanished on July 21, 1979, marking the beginning of a 2-year nightmare that would haunt Atlanta forever. This was the start of a horrific chain of events. Weeks later, the lifeless body of the first victim was discovered, a finding that sent shockwaves through the city. The cruel reality of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't a simple missing persons case, it was something far more dreadful. As the summer of 1979 turned into fall, more victims started to disappear. Each one, like the last, was a young, vulnerable child from Atlanta's African American community. The city was gripped by a growing sense of terror and confusion. Who was preying on their children and why? With each passing month, the list of victims grew longer. By the end of 1980, a total of 15 children had been reported missing, their fates unknown. The public outcry was deafening. Mothers held their children closer, while fathers patrolled the streets at night, desperate to protect their families from the unseen monster lurking in the shadows. Despite the rising tide of fear, the efforts to catch the killer proved fruitless. Law enforcement agencies, both local and federal, were pulled into the investigation. Yet the killer, or killers, remained out of reach. They were like ghosts, leaving behind only their victims as evidence of their existence. The city of Atlanta was on edge. The once vibrant and bustling city was now a place of dread and despair. The summer of 1981, 2 years after the first disappearance, was the darkest in the city's history. Still, the killer remained elusive, leaving a trail of sorrow and unanswered questions in their wake. Despite the tireless efforts of law enforcement, the killer remained elusive, leaving Atlanta in a state of fear and despair. The timeline of terror had etched itself into the city's history, forever casting a shadow over the memories of those 2 dreadful years. In the face of mounting pressure and a rising death toll, the investigation into the Atlanta child murders took a dramatic turn. As the calendar flipped to 1981, the apprehension of Wayne Williams marked a pivotal point in the case. Williams, a 23-year-old freelance photographer and aspiring music producer, was arrested under a cloud of suspicion and controversy. The evidence against him was circumstantial at best, with fibers from his home and vehicle allegedly matching those found on several victims. The trial that ensued was nothing short of a spectacle, captivating the nation. Williams was charged with the murders of 2 adults, yet the prosecution sought to link him to the child murders based on pattern evidence. The courtroom was a theater of high emotion, with the defense team fiercely arguing that Williams was a scapegoat, targeted because of his race and the city's desperation for closure. Despite the contentious trial in February of 1982, Williams was convicted and sentenced to 2 life terms. However, the verdict did little to quell the doubts, theories, and questions that swirled around the case. Critics argued that the true killer or killers were still out there and that the investigation had been mishandled, possibly due to political pressure. In the years that followed, the case continued to cast a long and dark shadow over Atlanta. In 2019, nearly 4 decades after the initial murders, the city announced it would be reopening the investigation. The decision was met with a mix of hope and skepticism. Some hoped that with advances in technology, justice might be served and the truth finally unearthed. Others, however, were skeptical, viewing this move as a political ploy, an attempt to assuage the public's lingering unease. While Wayne Williams sits behind bars, the shadow of uncertainty continues to hang over the Atlanta child murders. The echoes of this chilling case continue to resonate, a stark reminder of a city's unimaginable tragedy and an enduring mystery that refuses to fade into the annals of history. Over 4 decades have passed since the Atlanta child murders, yet the case continues to mystify and horrify in equal measure. We've journeyed through the timeline of terror, a period when innocence was lost and fear gripped the city. We've delved into the investigation, a maze of clues and leads that led to the conviction of Wayne Williams, but left many questions unanswered. The debates surrounding the case keep it alive, with new theories emerging and old ones being revisited. The impact of the murders extends far beyond the city limits of Atlanta. It's a haunting tale that has seeped into the collective consciousness of the world, a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unsuspecting places. The Atlanta child murders remain a chilling reminder of a time when a city was held captive by fear and a testament to the enduring search for truth and justice.